take 2 of this video now that I've actually found somewhere where you can see my face. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, or thanks for joining us if you're new here. My name is Maddie and today I'm going to be wrapping up all of the books that I read in July, which is a whopping 21 books, which is actually a little surprising to me because I feel like my mental health was all over the place this month. But I did read a lot of graphic novels and I did have some time off of work at the end of the month, which I think really helped kind of push my reading forward. So without further ado, let's dive in. The first book that I read this month was called Kiss Number 8, and it is a graphic novel by Colleen Venable and illustrated by Ellen Crenshaw. It follows this character of Amanda, who can't really figure out what the big deal is about kissing until she starts, thinking about some of her female friends and maybe what kissing them might be like. So it's really an exploration of like sexuality and identity, but there's also this like hidden family narrative that's happening that really kind of pulls together themes of religion and gender identity and sexuality, and kind of uncovering the past and healing past family trauma to kind of come into your own and build this understanding. It was a really incredible book. It took a lot of turns that I was not anticipating at all, but it approached a lot of really difficult topics with a lot of grace and sensibility. So it was a lovely graphic novel that I would definitely recommend that you check out. After that, I read The Fire Never Goes Out, which is another graphic novel by Noelle Stevenson, who is the showrunner for She-Ra, and this is kind of an autobiographical account of her life over the past, I think it's like 5 or 6 years. So it's really interesting because it's about her struggle with mental illness and her own sexuality, and as well as dealing with the pressures of being a creative and kind of making such big gains as a creative from such a young age, and really feeling like, where am I going from here? Feeling kind of lost and stunted. So it was really well done. I didn't know a lot about her besides the fact that she was the showrunner. Like when my mom pitched the book up for me from the library and I was looking at it and I was like, this author's name seems weirdly familiar, and I finally put the pieces together. So it was really interesting to kind of get that background, and as someone who wants to go into a creative industry, I feel like there is always that fear of being burnt out or not really creating the best content, or what if my best work is already behind me. So it was really refreshing to read perspectives on that. After that, I read another graphic novel that is called Banned Book Club, and I apologize if I pronounce this wrong. It's by Kim Hung-seok, Ryan Estrada, and Ko Hyung-jung. It's autobiographical of the one co-author who started college in 1983 in South Korea, and kind of this book club of books that she wasn't really supposed to be reading that she ended up falling into, and kind of how literature and censorship and this group really helped her find her voice as an activist and stand up to South Korea's Fifth Republic, which was a military regime at the time. I didn't know a lot about that history of South Korea, so that was really interesting to read about, and I think it's also a really important book that kind of tackles why censorship is so concerning and why it's really important to have accessibility of reading for people. I'm working right now on putting together a campaign for Banned Books Week, which is at the end of September into the beginning of October, and it's always fascinating to me to see what stories we ban and why they're banned, and like what telling people that they can't read these books mean. So in this case, it's a lot of political messaging and trying to kind of force everyone into the way of thinking that the regime wants, and kind of not really encouraging individuality and forward thinking. So that's definitely something that was really big with the censorship at that point in time. The next book that I read was Full Tilt Boogie, and I just read the first volume of this series, and it is by Alex de Campi and Eduardo Cana. So it follows T along with her grandmother and her cat as they're kind of like odd jobbing their way across the universe. The only thing that I found with this book is I felt like I was kind of like thrust into it mid-story. Maybe some of the later volumes give us a little bit more like background or grounding for kind of this world that is going on, and like who this prince is that they're trying to rescue, and some of the other like bounty hunting groups that are put together. But overall, it was kind of like bright and colorful and fun, and I really did love the like grandma just being along for the ride on this crazy bounty hunting adventure. But yeah, if I stumble across the second volume, I'll probably read it, but not necessarily something I'll go out of my way to try and find. After that, I read a book which I'm doing for a book club this month, and it is called Juliet Takes a Breath, and it is by Gabby Rivera and Celia Moscato, and this is an adaptation of a, I believe, like a YA novel, and it follows Juliet as she's leaving the Bronx and heading to Portland, and she's just come out to her family, and they didn't really take it the best, and trying to figure out what it means to deal kind of with the intersectionality of being a lesbian but also being Puerto Rican. So I think that's one thing that this book does an amazing job with, is really approaching the intersection of race and sexuality and gender as well, and looking at kind of, I guess, this sort of idea of like the white savior complex and people kind of hiding behind their race to kind of use their sexuality to almost like forward them or make them forward thinking in some way. There's this kind of character in the book that almost kind of reminds me of like a Gwyneth Paltrow Goop type person in a way, and kind of doesn't necessarily see Juliet for all that she is and is kind of using her as like a tokenist thing to move herself forward. So it's definitely a really interesting book, especially for like a younger audience, although there is some mature subject matter in it, but I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to those book club sessions where I'll be able to chat more with some other people about it. After that, I read Stephen King's N. It's a graphic novel adaptation of a Stephen King story. So Mark Guggenheim is the adapter, and then Alex Maleev is the illustrator, and obviously Stephen King wrote the original story. So it follows this field kind of it's called Archerman's Field in rural Maine, and there's kind of like this weird Stonehenge thing there where like sometimes there's 7 stones and sometimes there's 8 stones, and there's kind of this like connection of someone needing to be the keeper to keep whatever the stones are holding onto in, and as each person dies, then other people end up kind of taking over. I'm kind of a little surprised looking at my Goodreads that I gave it 4 stars, because I do think it falls a little bit into the realm of horror using mental illness as like a crutch or a cliche, which is obviously very concerning because each of these characters, as they kind of become the protector, take on these OCD tendencies, and there is multiple suicides throughout the story. So definitely a lot of triggering content that isn't necessarily dealt with in the best manner. So I always find it really hard because I'm like, you can definitely have a character in a horror novel who like has a mental illness, but like not blaming the supernatural for the mental illness or kind of using that as a crutch to like drive the story forward is a little bit concerning, and it's something that I'm struggling with the book that I'm reading right now. So I'm thinking I might make a bigger video to kind of try and address some of my thoughts on that, since I am a really big horror reader. So the next book that I read after that was Redbone, and this is a biographical graphic novel by Christian Stabler, Sonia Poloni, and Tybalt Ballet. I hope I said all of those right. And it is about the kind of intersection of the Native American civil rights movement and the rock band Redbone, which is an all-native rock band. The song Come and Get Your Love, which was a really big hit because of the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, was done by this band. And for the longest time, I didn't even know that they were a all-native rock band, which is super cool to me as an Indigenous person. I actually figured it out through some TikTok that I stumbled on. So it was really interesting to look at kind of the ideology behind what they chose to do and the intersection of everything that they were doing with a lot of the movements that were going on. So like Little Rock and the occupation of Alcatraz. So it's definitely inspired me to take some time to check out more of their music, and I think it's really cool to look at the way that their music intersects with the history of the time. So definitely would recommend checking that book out, especially if you're a big rock person or if you really like that song. It's cool to learn more about the band's kind of pantheon. Okay, after this, I read probably the worst books that I've read all year. So they're called Neighbor, and it is a webcomic, and they're by Slashapalooza, or Romax, I believe is the name of the author, and essentially they follow, I read the first 2 volumes before I was like, okay, enough, and I had to pay beyond that, and I was like, I don't need to be paying for this. So it follows these 2 characters who are neighbors, and they're kind of like getting to know each other as they live next door and then slowly developing a relationship from there. However, there's a lot of stuff in the book that's like not really dealt with well. Like the one guy seems to have some sort of like questionable past, and that like leads his mom to be like super kind of helicoptery when it comes to him with sexual relationships. And there's like a throw off comment about him like having to get tested regularly, and something about him like running away from home, and just a lot of things that almost seem a little bit like just done for the shock value. Especially too, there's this one character that supposedly like the whole soccer team just hooks up with because their girlfriends won't do anal with them, and also has a relationship with a teacher that is not dealt with at all. The fact that that is like pedophilia and underage sex, and like that person is in a position of power and this child cannot consent to be hooking up with them in a van before their classes. So yeah, a lot of issues with that. Very problematic. I don't know why I read 2 volumes of it. I think I just got hooked into the drama and I was like, I need to see how terrible this can get, but I gave them both 1 stars. Would not recommend checking them out at all. After that, I read another graphic novel that was meh, so we definitely hit a bit of a rut at this point in the month, and this was Amelia Cole and the Unknown World by Adam P. Nave. So it follows this character of Amelia Cole, and she's kind of like a witch, I guess, and she's able to go between the magical world and the real world, but there's kind of this, but she finds out from her aunt that she is likely from a world that's completely different and a blend of the 2 of them, and through a series of circumstances she finds herself trapped in that world and kind of trying to uncover the secrets of her past while also dealing with some of the nefarious people that are running that realm. It was pretty cool. The art was really interesting. I did only read the 1st volume. Again, probably similar to Full Tilt Boogie. If I like stumble across the next volume, I'll read it, but I'm not like crazy obsessed with it to go out of my way and check that out. Afterwards, I read Anyway the Wind Blows by Rainbow Rowell, and this is the final book in the Simon Snow trilogy. I did get this from my library because my copy was shipping to my home address and it wasn't like, there was no way I was going to get it for a while, and I was like, I need to know what happens. I did do a reading vlog for this, so I will link that up here if that is something that you want to check out. But I do want to say I think I was a little too harsh on it in my reading vlog. So this book really deals with kind of the fallout of everything that has happened in the last 2 books, and Simon and Baz and everyone trying to deal with their trauma and kind of comes to terms with who they are and where I am in my life, my mental health journey, and recovering and processing a past abusive friendship relationship that I was a part of. Everything in this book was a little too raw for me, and I think I was really harsh on it in that review because it hit too close to home, which I think means that she did a good job at exploring trauma. It just means that I'm like, I don't want to be dealing with this right now. So I definitely want to go back and reread some parts of it, maybe reread the whole book, probably reread the whole series at some point now that I have my physical copies, even though they are at home. I will get them at some point. But yes, reading more about it online and talking through it with my friend who was reading through it just after I finished definitely gave me a lot more perspective on it and kind of helped me separate my own personal shit from like judgments of the book itself. So that's something that I am aware of moving forward. After this, I read The Project by Courtney Summers, which I think is probably one of my favorite books that I have read this month, and it follows this character of Lo, who after a tragic car accident that takes the life of her parents, loses her sister to this cult known as The Project. I would like to take a moment to appreciate how pretty this cover is, and I just have to say, Courtney Summers has an incredible talent for writing. I read Sadie last summer and it like absolutely gutted me, and reading this, she does this amazing job of making Lev, who's kind of the cult leader, seem so appealing and charismatic, which is how people get lured into cults, because he's really like making use of their vulnerabilities. So for the whole book, you're really right in there with Lo, being like, is this man who took my sister from me as bad as I think? Like, is there a future here for me? What is going on? And trying to like process and understand all of that while the truth is slowly being uncovered. I think especially in the online age, it's kind of important to be wary of these things, because unfortunately it tends to be young people who are getting lured into these cults from their own like vulnerability and whatever's going on in their lives. So I think it's a really important novel to be written, and the characters were just incredible, and again the writing was amazing, so I would highly recommend checking that out. Afterwards, I read through the graphic novels that I got from Quindrie Press, which is a small indie publishing group in Edinburgh? They're somewhere in Scotland. And they're publishing, they really try to put forward the works of queer authors. So this was like a Kickstarter campaign that I participated in, and I heard about it from Hari, and they write Finding Home, and they're going to be editing the like next set, so I'll probably end up being on the Kickstarter campaign for that too. But to go through them all, so the first one that I read is The Beechwood Helm, which is by Letty Wilson, and I think this is probably my favorite of the four of them. There's this strange knight in red armor that comes out and challenges them, and they have to meet the challenge, but then the knight who ends up beating him kind of ends up like taking on the personalities of this, the red knight, the Beechwood knight, I think he's called, and his friend slash lover ends up coming out to kind of like rescue him and remind him of who he was, and it was just really beautiful. I'm a big sucker for like fight scenes where the person is fighting their loved one, but they're not aware of who they are, and they're like, I'm not going to hurt you no matter who you are. I need you to like remember who I am and that I care for you, which is a very specific niche, but this book has it and I loved it. Next, I read Wolvendaughter, and I guess the way that I could kind of describe this is there's like this society that I think is entirely made up of women, and one of them each time has to kind of be sent out to take care of this wolf and try to wrap their head around the sense of like duty and fulfillment that and sacrifice that comes with someone needing to take care of this wolf. The art is very gorgeous. This one is by Vare, and the twist at the end was really interesting with this one, so I super loved this one. The next one I read was What the Witch Saw. I think this was my least favorite just because it's a very visual narrative, not that I minded that at all. It's kind of like they go to settle the moon, and then from there she's trying to wrap her head around this relationship that just ended, and then a new blossoming relationship as well. It is by Thomas Helter. Very good. The like kind of like tarot carved ancient vibes. I am doing a terrible job at explaining the art style of this. Is very interesting. And then the last one from that set that I have is The Nightingale and the Rose by Jem Milton, and I loved this one too. It was a retelling of an Oscar Wilde story with a much happier ending, and the art is very gorgeous. It also has a wonderful non-binary protagonist with a beautiful love story throughout it, and big love for this one too. Absolutely adorable, and it was really nice to see kind of the twist and putting a bit of a happier ending on the way that that story is written, so I would definitely recommend this. I think you could buy any of these on their website. I will take a look at that and try and put that link in the description below if you are interested in checking out any of these and supporting small publishers, because please support small publishers, small bookstores. I'm really trying to not buy books from Amazon as much as possible and really try and support small publishers and authors and bookshops, whatever I can. After that, I read Crush by Richard Saikin, and this book and the next two are in a weekend reading vlog video that I did that I will link up here if you want to check that out. So this is a collection of poetry that really has to do with the feelings of kind of panic and obsession. It is absolutely gorgeous, probably one of the best collections of poetry I've read in a while. I really got it because I had been seeing his poetry posted on like Pinterest and Tumblr and a bunch of different places, and it was definitely lived up to the hype. I would really recommend checking it out if you have a chance. The next book that I read that weekend was This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is a sapphic romance between Red and Blue, who are on opposite sides of a war in this kind of dystopic universe. And Red comes from the Agency, which is kind of like this technotopia, and Blue comes from the Garden, which is like this singular organic matter. And the way that they kind of learn to bridge their differences and understand that maybe the war that they're fighting doesn't have the meaning that they think, and fall in love and find their way to each other. I did get a little bit lost in some of the sci-fi stuff, but overall I loved this book. Very good. Both of the authors do an amazing job with their respective characters. Would highly recommend checking that one out. After that, we have On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, which which is by Ocean Byung. I have no idea if I've been saying their last name wrong. I really hope I haven't been butchering it all this time. But this is written by the speaker Little Dog as a letter towards his mother, and it's really a book about like life and the human experience and understanding love and sexuality and trauma and race and masculinity and all of the intersections of these things, addiction, the opioid crisis, and how they come together in the speaker's life. The writing is absolutely incredible. I gave up writing quotes down at a certain point because I couldn't do it anymore. I'd just be writing everything down, and the character of Trevor in particular really warmed his way into my heart and then absolutely broke it. So this is a gorgeous book that I absolutely love, and I would highly recommend checking it out. This is probably another one of my favorites from the month. Okay, 2 more, and I think I'm managing to make this video not 8 hours long. So the next book that I read is a webcomic, which is Out of the Blue by Ari. I don't know why I didn't have this book like logged in my Goodreads, because I definitely like read it at some point this year, but what the hell, I had some time on the weekend, I went back and reread it, and then I actually recorded it. So it follows Felix, who is this blind dam worker, and it takes place in the early part of the 20th century, and he ends up meeting Mac, who is this mermaid who lives near him, and then after the dam kind of bursts, Mac ends up rescuing him. It's kind of this slow burn romance, but also them kind of learning to deal with their past and trust each other and lead into the future. The art style is adorable and the comic is absolutely beautiful, so I will be sure to link that down below if you want to check it out as well. And finally, last but not least, I started the webcomic Lore Olympus. Technically, I didn't finish the first season of this until like 1:30 in the morning on August 1st, but I'm gonna count it because I'm like, we were just barely over the line, but I'll keep the second season being in the next wrap-up that I do. But Lore Olympus is a retelling of the love story of Persephone and Hades, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it at first. Some of the art style and things, I didn't really know if it was my vibe, but I have since dived into it and spent so much time getting caught up on everything. It is on Webtoons. I will be sure to link it below. It's by Rachel Smith. The like solid colors for the different characters is incredible and really well done. One of the traumas that the characters go through hits really close to home, so I think I was struggling a little bit with reading it because I am awful at actually following trigger warnings, which is another video that I will probably put together at some point in time, why trigger content warnings are important and why you should actually listen to them and not be like me. But overall, this book does an incredible job of like taking Greek mythology and putting kind of this new spin and twist on it. So if you're a fan of Greek mythology, I would really recommend checking it out. Persephone is this like adorable cinnamon roll, and Hades is honestly like, I mean, I don't know if they're like technically dating at this point, but I would say like the best boyfriend slash friend ever. Like he does such a good job at like being supportive and not being like overbearing or putting crazy pressure on her. So really gorgeous, would definitely recommend checking that out if you're looking for some lovely free reading online. And I believe that the first season or part of the first season is going to be published in a physical form later this year. So if you prefer to read it that way, keep an eye out for it. That is the only thing that I did find with this webcomic was it could just be the size of my screen, but like some of the artwork like wouldn't really fit all on my screen at once, which was a little bit frustrating to have to like read the text and then look at the picture and not be able to fit it all on my screen at once, whereas some of the other webcomics I've read on different platforms work better. I also just don't like reading on Webtoons. Tapa's platform is so much better, but whatever. That's also a video for another time. So yeah, now that I am very out of breath and I probably went through this way too fast in an attempt to try and keep it under the half-an-hour mark, that is everything that I read this month. A whopping 21 books. There were some real gems in there, although August is off to a rocky start. I have to tell you, the book that I'm reading right now is not going so well, which is part of why I stopped to film this video, so I can get my mind off of it a little bit. I think that's everything that I have to say. If anyone has any suggestions for videos that they want to see, or a book in particular in this stack that you would like me to do a review for, just let me know. I love hearing from you all. And make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you get notifications when I post new videos. And until the next one, stay kind.